The airport was crowded with the usual blend of chaos and routine, a symphony of rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, and families rushing through terminals. Jasmine Crockett stood quietly near Gate 22, clutching her boarding pass in one hand and her ID in the other. She was dressed in a sharp black blazer, jeans, and ankle boots, nothing flashy, just refined. She glanced occasionally at the flight screen, calm and composed, waiting for the gate to open for boarding. Passengers moved around her, but she kept to herself, respectful of the space and the atmosphere. Two airline staff members standing near the gate began whispering to each other. Their eyes kept darting toward Jasmine. At first, she didn't think much of it. She was used to odd looks now and then, being a confident black woman in professional attire. But this was different. One of the attendants, a man with a tight-lipped expression, began walking toward her with a female colleague trailing close behind. They didn't offer a smile or a polite greeting, just a curt, businesslike tone that immediately felt off. "Ma'am," the male attendant said, "we're going to have to ask you to step away from the gate area. You're not permitted here." Jasmine blinked, startled. I'm sorry, what? I'm on this flight. Here's my boarding pass." She extended it toward them, thinking it had to be some sort of mix-up. But the attendant didn't even glance at it. "You've been flagged for suspicious behavior. Please step aside before we have to involve security." "Suspicious?" Jasmine repeated, her voice measured but incredulous. "I haven't done anything. I'm just waiting here like everyone else." The woman beside him crossed her arms. "We don't have to explain further. If you continue resisting, we'll be forced to remove you." Passengers nearby were beginning to notice. A few looked on with curiosity, others with indifference. No one stepped forward. Jasmine could feel her cheeks burning, not out of guilt, but from the sharp sting of humiliation. Still, she stayed calm. Years of navigating spaces like this had taught her to hold her composure when the world made no sense. Security arrived within moments. They didn't raise their voices or put hands on her. But their presence alone, tall, uniformed, and silent, sent a message. Jasmine had no choice. She nodded slowly and began to walk with them, casting one last glance at the gate, knowing her seat was being taken by someone else who didn't look like her. She didn't make a scene. She didn't cry. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was about power, assumptions, and a deep injustice that she had seen too many times before. And though she didn't say a word as she was led down the hall, she knew one thing for certain. They had just made a mistake they would never forget. The holding room was a drab, windowless space tucked behind a nondescript hallway, far from the bustling terminals. Fluorescent lights flickered faintly above Jasmine as she sat alone in a stiff plastic chair. Her purse sat on the floor beside her, untouched, but her phone had been taken by one of the guards with a muttered explanation about standard security procedure. There was no clock in the room, but she could feel every passing minute like a slow drip of water wearing down stone. She wasn't under arrest. No one had read her rights. But the message was clear: she wasn't welcome, and they were going to make her wait. Jasmine stared at the door, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. Why had they singled her out? What exactly had she done that was so suspicious? She hadn't argued. She hadn't raised her voice. She had simply stood at a gate with her boarding pass, like hundreds of others that day. The silence around her felt intentional, like punishment without the courtesy of explanation. Every now and then, muffled voices passed by the door, airport staff speaking in clipped tones, sometimes laughing. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but she knew the sound of mockery when she heard it. One comment floated clearly through the thin walls. She probably thought name-dropping would help her. "You know the type." A small laugh followed. Jasmine's fists clenched. They didn't know who she was. And that was the problem. To them, she was just another inconvenience to be dealt with, another assumption made, another box checked off under some silent, biased protocol. Her calm demeanor, her appearance, her mere presence, they had decided she didn't belong. She tried to breathe slowly, keeping the storm within from breaking the surface. She could have yelled. She could have demanded her rights. But none of that ever worked in rooms like this. The more composed she stayed, the more powerful her presence became. She sat still, back straight, eyes fixed forward. Her silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. In the corner of the room, a small security camera blinked red. She looked directly into it. "He'll come," she whispered under her breath. "And when he does, you'll all see who I am." There was no fear in her voice, just a quiet promise carried on the edge of dignity. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to ask, was that Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a woman with a blazer and confidence. She was married to one of the most powerful political voices in the country. And the moment her husband found out where she was, the entire balance of power in that building would shift. They thought they had silenced her. But they were wrong. The silence was only the warning before the storm. Outside the airport, the rhythm of traffic carried on without notice, until a sleek black SUV rolled up to the VIP entrance with purpose. The doors didn't wait to be opened by attendants. One of them flew open as Congressman Marcus Delroy stepped out, his polished dress shoes striking the pavement with urgency. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a navy suit that clung to his frame with quiet power, his very presence commanded attention. A pair of security aides flanked him, walking in stride, eyes scanning, jaws tight. Inside the airport, employees paused mid-conversation, sensing something had shifted. He didn't waste time. With a clipped tone, he spoke to the front desk agent, flashing his badge, voice low but full of pressure. "Where is Jasmine Crockett? She was scheduled to board a 4:30 p.m. flight. She's been missing for over an hour, and her phone is off. You're going to tell me, right now, where my wife is." The agent hesitated, glancing at a monitor, unsure of what she was stepping into. "Sir, I'm not certain, I believe there was a security matter." "A security matter?" he snapped, cutting her off. His tone was still controlled, but it simmered with the weight of years spent fighting against injustice in courtrooms and on the House floor. "My wife is a law-abiding citizen, a former civil rights attorney, and a sitting member of a congressional task force. If you so much as delayed her travel because of someone's prejudice, you are about to have the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and the Congressional Oversight Committee up your neck before dinner." Down the hallway, the door to the holding room swung open without a knock. Jasmine looked up, and there he was, Marcus. His face, normally composed with diplomatic restraint, was tight with concern and fury. Behind him stood two airport executives and one visibly panicked security officer. Jasmine rose slowly from the hard plastic chair, her voice soft but steady. "Took you long. Enough." Marcus walked straight to her and wrapped his arms around her without saying another word. In that moment, no titles mattered, just the fact that his wife had been humiliated, isolated, and detained without cause. He turned to the staff standing awkwardly behind him. "Apologize to her," he said coldly. "Right now. And then you're going to explain to both of us exactly why she was pulled aside in the first place." The staff fumbled over themselves, stammering apologies that rang hollow. It was a misunderstanding, protocol, flagged system error, none of it sounded convincing. Jasmine didn't even respond to them, her gaze held steady on Marcus. She didn't need to speak, her dignity had never wavered, not even when they tried to strip it away. Within hours, the story exploded across social media. A local journalist caught wind of it and released a thread that went viral. The phrase, "Jasmine Crockett detained at airport for standing while black," began trending. By the end of the day, national news networks were running segments on implicit bias in airport security. Footage from surveillance cameras was leaked, showing Jasmine simply waiting at her gate, silent, peaceful, and doing absolutely nothing wrong. The airport issued a formal apology by nightfall, but the damage had already spread. Several staff members were placed on leave, and a federal inquiry was launched into profiling complaints across major transit hubs. Marcus gave a press conference from the Capitol steps the next morning, reminding the country that no one, not even a congressman's wife, is immune to injustice when prejudice is allowed to operate unchecked. As for Jasmine, she said little to the press. When asked by a reporter how she kept her composure during the incident, she simply replied, "I've spent my whole life being told to wait quietly, to be patient, to not cause a scene. But that patience isn't weakness, it's preparation. And when the world decides to see us clearly, they'll understand that we've been ready all along." That evening, Jasmine and Marcus boarded a private flight together. She held his hand as they took off, the city lights fading below. She hadn't needed anyone to save her, but it felt good to know that when justice knocked on the door, it came in wearing a suit and spoke with the full weight of truth.